Imagine standing in the heart of Rome in the summer of 64 AD. The air is heavy with the smell of smoke, and the once mighty city trembles under the crackle of flames. The fire eats its way through temples, markets, and homes, leaving nothing but ashes and despair. In the middle of this chaos, whispers spread through the streets. Our Emperor Nero is watching not from fear, but with delight. But who was this man, Nero? Was he truly the monster who played music while his city burned? Or was he a ruler caught in the grip of madness, trapped by power, paranoia, and history's judgment? Nero Claudius Caesar Augustus Germanicus was not born into an ordinary family. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was ambitious beyond imagination. She maneuvered her son into power, even marrying her own uncle, the Emperor Claudius, to secure Nero's place on the throne. When Nero became emperor at the tender age of 16, Rome expected a golden age. He was young, charismatic, and full of promise. At first, his rule seemed surprisingly kind. He reduced taxes, banned secret trials, and even allowed slaves to sue their masters, a revolutionary idea for the ancient world. But behind the mask of generosity, a darker nature was waiting to surface. Nero's love for art and theater was innocent at first. He adored singing, poetry, and acting, things no Roman emperor was expected to do. To the Roman elite, an emperor on stage was shameful. But to Nero, it was his destiny. He believed himself not just an emperor, but a godlike performer whose art could touch eternity. The young Nero began surrounding himself with flatterers who praised his voice and performances. Slowly, the boy who once ruled with a gentle hand began to change. His insecurities grew. He began to see enemies everywhere, within the Senate, among his advisors, even inside his own household. And soon, those suspicions turned deadly. The first cracks appeared in his relationship with his mother. Agrippina, who had placed Nero on the throne, expected to control him. She demanded influence over his decisions and scolded him when he resisted. But Nero, growing bolder, no longer wanted to be his mother's puppet. Their conflict escalated until, in one of the most chilling acts of Roman history, Nero plotted her death. After failed attempts with poison and collapsing boats, Nero ordered her execution. The boy emperor had killed the woman who gave him life and power. From that moment on, Rome began to see Nero not as a ruler, but as a tyrant. His early promise of kindness and reform was drowned by whispers of cruelty, paranoia, and madness. And yet, the worst was still to come, because in just a few years, the Eternal City itself would face a nightmare, a fire so devastating that it would scar Rome forever. And at the center of it all, Nero's name would be etched in infamy. It was the night of July 18th, 64 AD. Rome slept under a moonlit sky, unaware that by morning, its streets would become rivers of flame. In the crowded district near the Circus Maximus, a small fire began. No one knows how it started. Perhaps a kitchen flame left unattended, or perhaps something more sinister. Within hours, the fire spread uncontrollably. Rome was not built to withstand such a disaster. Its narrow streets, wooden houses, and tightly packed markets made the city a perfect fuel for destruction. The flames leapt from building to building, climbing higher, turning night into a terrifying day of red skies and choking smoke. Families rushed into the streets, carrying whatever they could salvage. Children screamed, animals fled, and temples collapsed under the inferno. The heat was so intense that it melted coins and statues. The fire raged for 6 days straight, only to rekindle again and burn for another 3. By the time it ended, 10 of Rome's 14 districts were destroyed. In the midst of this horror, the question arose, where was Nero? Ancient historians like Tacitus and Suetonius paint a dark picture. They claim that Nero watched the flames from his palace, singing about the fall of Troy, imagining himself as a tragic hero while his people burned alive. Whether this was truth or rumor, it stuck to Nero's image forever. But the truth was more complicated. Some accounts say Nero was not even in Rome when the fire began. He was at his villa in Antium when news reached him. He rushed back to the city, opening his gardens to shelter the homeless and organizing relief efforts. He even reduced the price of grain to prevent famine. Yet none of this erased the suspicion. To the people of Rome, Nero was guilty not of negligence, but of indifference. Rumors began to spread that Nero himself had ordered the fire. Why? Some believed he wanted to clear space to build his dream palace, the Domus Aurea, or Golden House, a vast mansion decorated with jewels, fountains, and golden halls. Indeed, after the fire, he seized the land and began construction. To Rome's citizens, it was proof enough, but Nero needed a scapegoat. He pointed the finger at a small, mysterious religious group known as Christians. At the time, Christians were already unpopular for refusing to worship Roman gods. Nero accused them of arson, unleashing brutal persecutions. Christians were crucified, burned alive, or torn apart by wild beasts in the arena, all to divert blame from the emperor. The fire of Rome was not just a tragedy of destruction. It became the turning point where Nero's madness could no longer be hidden. He had turned grief into spectacle and suspicion into bloodshed. And as the smoke cleared from the ruins, the emperor who once promised Rome a golden age now stood as a figure of terror. With Rome in ashes, Nero grew more detached from reality. He believed himself an artist, a genius, a god among men. But his obsession with performance consumed him. He forced senators and noble families to sit through endless recitals of his poetry and singing. To leave before the performance ended was a crime. For Rome's elite, humiliation became a daily ritual. Nero began to compete in public games, racing chariots and performing on stage. Ordinary citizens were amused, but the Senate whispered in outrage. An emperor was meant to lead armies and govern empires, not prance across a stage. Yet Nero cared little. He craved applause more than power. Paranoia, however, never left him. After the fire, Rome's trust in Nero collapsed. Rebellions began to stir in the provinces. Senators plotted quietly, waiting for the right moment to strike. But Nero's fury was merciless. Anyone suspected of disloyalty was executed. Friends, advisors, even his beloved wife Poppaea, whom he reportedly killed in a fit of rage by kicking her death while she was pregnant. By now, the emperor was a man unrecognizable from the hopeful boy who once promised fairness. He was isolated, feared, and addicted to his own myth. He built his golden house upon the ashes of Rome, filling it with jewels, gardens, and a massive statue of himself as the sun god. To Nero, he was not a ruler of men. He was an embodiment of art, power, and divine will. But Rome was losing patience. Famine struck, military defeats weakened the empire, and the Senate's resentment grew. In the provinces, uprisings flared. The legions no longer trusted their emperor, and generals began to dream of wearing the crown themselves. Nero's madness was no longer confined to poetry and theater. It infected his rule, his family, and the empire itself. Rome was beginning to see not just a tyrant, but a madman dragging the empire into ruin. The stage was set for Nero's final act. By 68 AD, Rome had had enough. Rebellion broke out in Gaul, led by Julius Vindex, and soon other generals joined the cause. The Senate declared Nero a public enemy, stripping him of power. For the first time, the man who called himself divine felt the cold shadow of mortality. Abandoned by his guards and even his servants, Nero fled the city in disguise, hiding in the villa of a loyal freedman. The once mighty emperor, who had commanded armies and built palaces of gold, now trembled in fear. He begged for someone to kill him, unable to summon the courage to end his own life. Finally, with soldiers closing in, Nero whispered his last words. "What an artist dies in me." With the help of his secretary, he stabbed himself in the throat. Nero was only 30 years old. His death ended the Julio-Claudian dynasty and plunged Rome into chaos known as the Year of the Four Emperors. But his legend never died. To some, he was the Antichrist, the beast of revelation, the embodiment of cruelty. To others, he was a misunderstood artist destroyed by power and paranoia. Even after his death, rumors spread that Nero had not truly died, that he would return to reclaim his throne. For centuries, pretenders arose across the empire, claiming to be Nero reborn. His shadow haunted Rome long after the flames had turned to ash. The story of Nero is not just about one man's madness. It is about the fragility of power, the danger of unchecked ambition, and the haunting truth that sometimes the ones meant to protect us are the ones who bring the greatest destruction. The fire of Rome was not just a physical disaster. It was a symbol of Nero's reign, a blaze that began small but consumed everything in its path until nothing was left but ruin, fear, and a name forever etched in history as the emperor who watched Rome burn